Hello and welcome to this People Management webinar on People Power, sourcing brilliant ideas using social media. Our hope is that we're going to have sparked some brilliant ideas for you by the time we close, promptly at 2 p.m. My name's Rob MacLachlan and I'll chair our proceedings. I'm sure everyone's aware who our three presenters are, and they'll say a little about themselves at the start of their slots. I'd like to thank IBM for sponsoring today's webinar, which means that you, the audience, can participate free of charge. You may be interested to know that 864 people have registered for the webinar. Before we begin, just a couple of points to ensure everything runs smoothly. Firstly, if you have any technical problems, please use the questions panel on your screen to send a brief email explaining the problems and we'll try to help. Second, the main purpose of the questions panel is to enable you to submit questions prompted by what our speakers say. You can do this at any time, and I'll be selecting questions from those that we receive to put to the speakers in the final 20 minutes or so for the panel discussion. Finally, we also have some poll questions for you to establish what are your key concerns or priorities as an audience in this subject field, and I'll feed these results back during the webinar itself. Now, we'll take the first poll question now, and you will see on the right-hand side of your screen the poll section. If you could select poll 1, you will see a multiple choice question. So we invite you to select an answer, the most appropriate answer, and then press OK. So the questions, which option best describes the importance given in your organization to creativity and innovation? A, it's a continuous strategic priority with active HR involvement. B, there's lots of talk but not much effective action. C, it's not as important for us as it is in other industry sectors. So please make sure you've chosen the one that most closely fits your situation. And we're going to close the poll in a couple of seconds. So now on to our first speaker, and I'm going to invite Al Shah to start by introducing himself. Over to you, Al.
Thank you, Rob. Hi, I'm Al Shah, and pleased to be asked back by PM to share my experiences and knowledge on the use of social media to such a distinguished audience, and we have so many of you today. I've left a highly regulated pharmaceutical back in April to form a consultancy that can help make business sense of social media, social collaboration, and social business within your organizations. Over the next few slides, I'm going to share the what, why, and how before finishing with a few examples of success of the use of social to innovate. In such a short time, there'll be so much information, and the slides, as they're going to be shared with you, you'll be able to see the notes pages giving you more detail. But please do get in touch if you'd like even more information than that. Okay, so I'd like to start by looking at the plagiaristic view of innovation. I'm using this to unlock the potential from within your own companies. From looking at how people use social media, mostly to look at customer relationship management in their organizations, looking at what they do with their external customers, they can actually do that same kind of practice inside the organization, because your employees are effectively customers of your services, your products. They behave in much the same way. In fact, when they use your products, they're more critical of what's needed than some of the external customers. So it's all about understanding what those customers want and what they do and how they behave, and that gives us insight into what our future employees are going to behave like. So a little bit about the why. This is quite a common slide you might have seen before. It's talking about the top element that's visible to the organization, outside the organization, your marketing campaigns, your projects inside the company, etc. But all of those really only work really well when they have a unified body of people behind them, behind the scenes, keeping it together. And what you really need to do is to find people who can invoke conversations within the organization, find out where the gaps are, what's happening, and listen to what's going on. And if you bring all of this together properly, then what it will give you is insight into strategic decision-making. Your strategies need to be more agile, more faster, and adapt as your customers, your internal staff are telling you what's going on. So the trick is all about getting people talking and, above all, listening to them. So a quick word on influencers. You might have seen this come up in a few other presentations. Influencers are people who can provoke some of those social conversations that really bring out the creativity and innovation in an organization and externally. But the one thing I'd like you to touch on is the bottom right here, credibility and authenticity. It's critical that people are genuine in what they say, how honest they are inside the organization if you want to make a difference, because that also builds on trust. So a little bit now on the how. So this is quite a complex diagram. I'm not going to go through it all, but please do look at the notes and it'll give you more detail. What I'm trying to do here is to say, if you do proper social listening, that is, once you get people conversing, listen to what they're talking about, and you'll find that you've got certain gaps in your organization in terms of your service offerings or your product offerings to your customers. This is a famous service quality model that indicates gap 1, for example, to the left-hand side, says the management in an organization is quite often far removed from the customers. So what they think the customers expect and what the customers themselves expect can be very different. So placing the right intricate points within an organization and listening to what's going on will give you an idea of where those gaps lie and help you prioritize what you're going to be working on. Many people often ask me, but that only works if a culture in an organization is one of sharing. People quite often don't want to share what's going on, especially if it's negative or concerning about what's happening in a company. So I've given them tips like this. What this says is, if you list in the center of the paradigm what your current culture is, maybe it's one of not sharing, or maybe it's one of legal requirements tying you down too much, things like that. And then look at the 6 facets around that paradigm and what holds that paradigm true. These facets can be tangible and intangible. There are 3 of each. Then you do the exercise again, but this time you put a desired paradigm down. So one of a culture of open sharing, for example. And you go through those 6 original facets and you start to decide which ones would need to change and change to what in order for you to get to the new paradigm. There's more details on this in the slides, but please do come back to me if you'd like to find out more. One of the key things that you do need to do is to get your messaging right. Values, beliefs, and purposes. All of your communications really must drive towards a purpose. Today, your employees really do look for why you're doing what you're doing, as opposed to just being told that they need to fit into a particular function. If you get this right, what you'll find is that trust will go through the roof. Trust is a value that many companies are trying to instill in their companies. And through social and through allowing them the freedom of talking, starts to build that trust. But you really get there when you start seeing visible signs that they understand the purpose. Likewise, you'll find that loyalty will go up as well. They want to be part of your organization. They want to be with you for longer. And I've got a great example of a company that's found that success by accident. By getting the beliefs right in people and by getting them to understand why you do what you do, you'll also find the fear and apprehension that suggests that you've got risk in an organization if you open it up too much, that risk subsides because people want to be very positive about what you're doing as opposed to tittle-tattle. So it's all about learning to trust those employees. So I'm just going to finish with a couple of examples of where this really works. The first one is a link to an RSA Animate that did a study on what drives people, what makes people creative, innovative, what makes them socially connect. And they did an experiment on does money motivate people? So if we were to give people a bonus, an incentive to do more in their work, would it actually improve performance? And they surprisingly found that any job where you have to use cognitive skills, or any job where you start to believe in what you're doing and actually wanting to be there, money is actually a demotivator. Sounds bizarre, but it's actually true. They took that same experiment to the East, they took it to India, they took it to Japan, and they found across the world people behave the same way. And this is because if you think about your workforce, when they leave work, they go onto Facebook, they start to see what problems are coming up from their friends, and they help each other. They openly share their experiences. That's part of mastery. That's improving what they know, what they want to develop in. It's all about autonomy. It's about the freedom to be able to act as they will. And those sorts of facets that are making the driving go forward. Okay, so examples of where companies have taken this to the nth degree. Morningstar is a food company in America that now constitutes a majority of the tomato factory and consumption in America. But what they've done with their social enterprise is completely remove the hierarchy. Social will help you break boundaries across company, but it'll also break some of the hierarchy in that any level can talk to any level. What Morningstar have done is a completely flat structure where the individuals have a mission statement that's agreed amongst their peers, and they go about their day-to-day business knowing that they're helping each other and growing within their remits without any hierarchical structure whatsoever. A couple of final examples on that similar vein is throwing out the rule book. What Valve have done is an innovative thing. What they do is, Valve is a game company, by the way, that does Half-Life and products like that. And what they've done is instill a system of desks on wheels. They employ people with highly skilled talents. They're not employing people to fit a particular job. They're employing people who can bring some creativity and innovation. So what they say to them is that you come up with an idea, you pull people together that will make that idea come real, and you move your desk to where that project needs to take you to. There's no such thing as a complex hierarchy or a job function anymore. Final example I'll leave you with is Zappos. I mentioned earlier about loyalty. Zappos is a shoe reseller, online reseller, and they've just hit just over $1 billion turnover before they sold out to Amazon. They had to move from mid-America to LA, and they found that over 80% of their company wanted to relocate with them because of this social nature, the way they run their business inside. They throw rule books out because through that gaps analysis they discovered that their customers and their staff were saying that call centers just don't work. If you give call centers scripts to follow and time limits per person to deal with, and yet you value customer service so much, it just doesn't make sense. So they threw the rule book out. And what they found was, on history, they've got one of the longest phone calls for support ever, 6 hours for a lady who couldn't decide what colour shoes she wanted to buy. But what they have done is they've built up such a following because being able to send shoes back a year later, being able to not have to worry about paying for them both directions, it's just the kind of stuff that you think you'd never make any money, and yet they're one of the most successful online resellers. Okay, so in summary, to sort of takeaways for you, you have got an amazing potential inside the organization. Many of your employees are customer-facing. Different parts of the organization have really good ideas, creative, innovative ideas, but they just need to be allowed to air them, not just within their job function, but across the company. And if they believe in what you stand for as an organization, they'll be very willing to share that. So just give them that opportunity. Give them a voice. Don't worry about if they moan at it, because that just tells you just need to adapt your comms to get the message about purpose right. But when you do listen to them, you'll get somewhere really well.
Just to say the clock is
I am sorry.
on our first segment.
Thank you.
Are we nearly there?
We're there now, Rob. Yeah, I'll leave this slide up for a second. It's just to say there is a lot of information there, so do please keep in touch. I'd like to continue this conversation with many of you. Thank you, Rob.
And thank you, Al. That's been a fascinating overview of the business strategy and culture, organization culture context. And I knew that the people power slogan that we used for this webinar is a radical political manifesto. I hadn't quite realized just how appropriate and radical it is as a business manifesto too. Now, at this point, I want to feed back the results of the first poll question. And just to remind you what the question was, which option best describes the importance given in your organization to creativity and innovation? And we had 29% said it's a continuous strategic priority with active HR involvement. 18% said there's lots of talk but not much effective action. And for me, a surprising number, 53% said it's not as important for us as it is in other industry sectors. I'll be interested whether those people feel the same when we get to the end of today's webinar. I suspect not. I'd like to mention that you'll be able to download a copy of today's slides used by each speaker from the PM website sometime next week, and we'll send you an email with the link that you need. We'll also make sure that the speaker's contact details are included in case you want to follow up with any of them directly. Now, we'll take the second poll question. So please select poll 2 and choose one of these answers. So the question is, which of these concepts do you personally feel most engaged with at present? Social media, social collaboration, or social business? Choose the one that you feel most engaged with. And as we proceed with Lucile and Jane, we will drill down more into these different concepts. So that poll is now closed, and I'd like to turn now to our second presenter, Lucile Leclerq of Sogeti. Welcome, Lucile.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for handing me the speaker. So I'm going to take you through Team Park, what we call our journey towards social business. I'm just going to introduce briefly my company so that you understand a bit how we work and the challenges we are facing. So Sogeti is a French-owned company by Capgemini that is listed on the Paris Stock Exchange. We are an IT technology services provider, meaning that we provide consulting services to our clients. We gather 20,000 employees spread across 15 countries. So just a bit more about Team Park. Team Park is the name we have given to our global social collaboration platform. How do we get Team Park, just so that you have a brief historical background behind it? So in 2008, we launched what we call the Innovation Jam. That was a global survey across the whole group, a survey for our clients, but also for our people. And our people massively asked for the means to collaborate and communicate and innovate across the group. And so this survey and this result made us try to look for a collaboration platform, and in the end we selected IBM Connections. So we launched Team Park that is based on IBM Connections. We launched it as early as 2009 to our 20,000 people in 15 countries. So we were one of the two first companies to implement IBM Connection across the world. Today, in 2012, we have 10,000 users, 64% of adoption, going from 97% in the Nordics to 26% in India. We have 1,900 communities, 900 blogs, and 5,000 wiki pages. So that's a bit of for the background. Now I'm just going to introduce myself a bit more, because my role at Sogeti is really key on how you make the most out of social business, out of a social collaboration tool. So as I said before, my name is Lucile Leclerq. I'm French. I'm based in Stockholm. I'm also very active on social media, so I encourage you to get in touch with me that way. But most of all, my role is that I'm the global social collaboration driver of Sogeti. I've been working for Sogeti Group for 2 years, during which I've been in charge of our social collaboration platform, TeamPark. I've been in charge of driving usage and adoption for 20,000 people in 15 countries. And also, I'm in charge of leading in a more global way, the evolution, the transformation of our business into a social business. So why do we have TeamPark? I think what's important to understand is that for us, it was the answer to an evolution and a necessity. The evolution, you've all heard about it. It's the acceleration of knowledge and information sharing across the globe through social media, through external tools such as Facebook, Twitter, Wikipedia, LinkedIn, and so on. But also as a business, we were facing several challenges. As a global knowledge company, we were expanding geographically, we were getting more and more global in the way we worked, so around our services. We also needed to tackle knowledge retention and sharing. We needed to make sure that when we had brilliant spirits, our gurus, our experts, that we were providing the means to those people to actually share and collaborate across the whole company. But most of all, that whenever we would lose those people, we will not lose the people and the knowledge, that we will still keep a part of their expertise inside. And also, we wish to tackle innovation. And this meant that we wanted to enable our people to get engaged, to participate in the company, to gather, to create networks of expertise across the group and not necessarily only within a country. That really we wanted to push our people to get engaged and to provide them with the means to participate to the future of the company. Then how do we witness innovation on TeamPark, and how did it help us to innovate? We see basically innovation happening within communities. So communities in that sense are specific virtual groups, virtual areas that are created on our platform and that gather people with common interests. So we see innovation happening because we enable people to gather from different countries, from different areas of expertise. So this happens in communities. But then we see two types of innovation. We see an innovation that is much more managed, that happens into communities that actually reflect the organizational structure of the company. So we have communities for our innovation labs, for our research institutes, for our center of excellence, research and development, and so on. So those communities are actually more to facilitate the knowledge sharing from our gurus, our experts, and to enable our researcher to stay in touch with client expectations and experiences. So it's more the innovation of a small group is made profitable and improved by the accessibility that is given to the entire company. That's one thing. Then we see a much more interesting, probably, type of innovation that is much more spontaneous. That is about, that happens into communities that are not meant for innovation at the very beginning, but are just gathering professionals around practices, solutions, services, or technologies. So those professionals are mainly reporting their needs, their issues, and try to solve or to come up with new solutions to solve particular business cases, to respond to client needs. So this sharing of inputs then starts and becomes kind of a brainstorm. And what is really interesting, what we see happening, is that total nobodies in the company, people who are just random consultants, become real innovators, become charged with an enormous power inside the company, becomes the one that influences the innovation of the whole company by driving conversations, by pushing debates, and so on, by connecting the people who know and the people who can help. So what we see is the creation of cross-discipline communities. between, for example, mobile and testing, but especially around banking, where we see people from Netherlands, from the US, explaining how their problems and how it's been solved in different countries, how we could improve our solutions and so on. And the result of this is that it gathers different networks of people, but also that new solutions are created to proactively respond to client needs. So sometimes our people also identify needs that have not yet emerged, but that are going to be out on the market pretty soon. So that's how innovation happens on Teamwork. Now, just briefly about my job. So I think what's important to bear in mind is that this whole social collaboration process, but more globally, the evolution towards social business, it's really an evolution. It's not about a tool. So how am I leading change? Because actually that's my job, to lead change within the company. I'm focusing heavily on communication, to spread the vision, to explain to our people what we are trying to achieve, why we have this tool and so on. I'm positioning the tool, strategically speaking, at the global level to make sure that it supports our business strategy. I have regular meetings with top management. So Teamwork is really at the center of how we collaborate and communicate across the group. And then I'm also focusing heavily on training and education. And for this, I'm working heavily with HR people. So I'm providing training sessions and workshops for targeted groups in order to push usage. And I'm also focusing massively on management. We are training them on how to be a social leader, how to handle sensitive situations on the tool, how to support innovation. And all of this is done with the input of HR people and with their participation. So we build cross-disciplinary, basically, training sessions. And then finally, I'm also doing a lot of community management that is basically about building bonds and trust with users, encouraging, pushing collaboration, networking, and getting our people engaged. So just to finish, some things to bear in mind very quickly when going for a social collaboration tool and broadly when deciding to embrace social business. First thing is basically, I would say, not to underestimate the scale and depth of the evolution. It's definitely not an IT project. Then to secure the leadership and management support and engagement in this global initiative, try to build up leaders, to spread the vision, and to make sure that they understand their role as leaders and as managers. Then to work on governance before issues pop up, to involve the legal department, to do workshops, to create processes, to be sure to have a clear adoption strategy and regular communication. Communication is key, and training is also essential. To take into account cultural diversity. And finally, to work ahead on integration and accessibility. Here is, I'm finished with my presentation. You can just see here are my contacts if you want to hear a bit more about our experience and how we could help us also to achieve this shift. Back to you, Rob.
That's great, Lucile. Thank you very much. It's particularly clear from what you've said how valuable social platforms are for a global business. And it seems very appropriate somehow that you're contributing from Stockholm today. So I would like to feed back the results of the second poll question now. And just to remind you, we asked, which of these concepts do you personally feel most engaged with at present? Social media, 65% of you chose this option. Social collaboration, 23%, and social business, 12%, which I suspect our speakers would all agree is the sort of shape we would expect in any audience at the moment, and perhaps today's webinar will help to shift that focus on a bit. Now we'll go straight to the third poll question now. So if you can select poll 3, please, and then the appropriate answer. And the question is, which one of these potential communities using social platforms offers most immediate added value for your business from HR? A, potential future recruits, so primarily a recruitment tool. B, learning and development communities. That could be anything from top team development to induction training, but using social tools for learning and development. C, your internal HR community. So please press OK on whichever you feel would give most immediate added value. And I'm delighted now to hand over to Jen Marsh at IBM to drill down a bit further and particularly into the concepts of social business, which of course is so closely associated with IBM, and into the HR dimension of all that. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you very much, Rob, and hello everybody. I'm going to spend just a little time, if you like, on IBM's approach to social business, as Rob explained, and then I'm going to just share with you some sort of real-life examples of how in the HR function at IBM we've actually used these tools. I'll just go back to the first chart. So you'll see there, this is really just how IBM would express in the use of engaged, transparent, and nimble what we see at its core as social businesses. And what do we mean by that? Well, we really just mean it's enabling people to make connections in a different sort of way. Engagement happens more informally, and people connect who wouldn't necessarily have found that connection path to each other under a more traditional structure. Transparency is really about removing unnecessary boundaries between experts inside the company and experts in the marketplace. And nimble, I mean, that's really because accessibility being on things like mobile devices, it enables what might be seen as constraints such as time zones or physical locations. It turns them from constraints into advantages. So just to look at that a little deeper, I mean, really in a traditional business model, employees might not feel that there's a forum where they feel confident about expressing their opinions or thoughts, which might not be entirely fully formed. And if they do, they would probably only be expressing them into a relatively small group of people, either the people who might be in the physical meeting that they're in, or people who might be on the phone call that they're all participating in. And from our perspective, a social business really turns that on its head. So just a little bit, Lucile mentioned the IBM Connections tool. This is the software that actually we use internally and also our clients use. And just to give you some examples of this, some real-life examples, the first one I would share is that IBM, we were developing an interest in creating a wider network group than we had access to get together and brainstorm on diversity and inclusion initiatives and develop knowledge sharing. So we arranged a rather sort of traditional, if you like, get-together as a breakfast meeting, and we invited clients to participate in that. But what we were able to do following that was to create a community which had all those participants in it, which enabled the dialogue that had started in that physical meeting to continue outside the parameters of the meeting and in between the next meeting that we'd arranged. And that was something that people could participate in at their own pace, if you like, consistent with their own diaries and abilities. But we could start discussion threads and continue discussions that had started in the meeting. And it just enabled that group of people to collaborate together differently than in the sort of traditional model, if you like. On this chart, you'll see some of the capabilities that are within the tool. But what I would emphasize is that the community that develops under Lotus Connection, it's a sort of living, breathing thing, and its direction is chosen by the participants. So there's no one sort of size fits all, and you will pick up and actually run with different possibilities for the community, just depending on, as I say, where the people take it. So again, as an example, I've set one of these up for the UKI HR community, and the way our community has gone is that it is developing strongly in the area of blogs. I write a weekly blog, and that's encouraged other people in the team to write a blog that might be about an event they've been to or an interesting meeting they've been in. It's a very informal, deliberately very informal sharing experience that's just put out there for people to read. People can sort of comment, and a lot of my team feel very connected to me and what's on my mind and my thoughts on my week, the week that's just gone and the week that's ahead. So they feed back to me that it means they feel very connected to me, and as we're all spread out in different locations in the UK, it enables that sense of connection for people who might not otherwise physically get to see me or might not know, be so connected to the current UKI topics, because they might actually be working in a global role. I have one of the UK employees who actually supports recruitment in China and India, because those are the main recruitment in our growth market areas. Now, she's not actually working on UKI HR business at all, but as a result of being able to give an access to this community, which obviously is a confined access that we can control, she feels connected to, she knows what's, current, if you like, and on our minds as a UKI function. And as she may circulate from a career perspective away from that global role and come back into a UKI role, she's felt connected to it. Equally, I learned the other day, for example, that if people are returning from maternity leave, they are encouraged to go into the community and read the blogs as a way of understanding, what the leadership thoughts are and what current sort of trends. And so our community, it also is a knowledge sharing repository and a discussion forum where people will now go on, and if they have a particular issue, they will look to post and ask for other people to sort of help. So that's the way our community is developed. It doesn't mean that any other community would necessarily follow that path. So the next chart is another example of how we use the capacity of that platform to engage with each other. So our jam sessions, we've run one, for example, where the participants were the entire UKI employee population, where we asked them to participate. It's really online brainstorming, which you start to provide the direction. You ask people to think along a certain topic, but then really the discussions that happen just go where they go, depending on participation. So that's, for example, connected all of the employees in the UKI together. This one that I've got some charts on really connected the HR function globally. It was 3 days, and what we asked people to think about was to look at the trends driving business change in the decades to come. We called it Think Future. It was deliberately looking into the future. And we asked them to think about the implications that might result for business in general, IBM in particular, and for the HR profession. And you can see at the bottom right just some of the participation that we had. 64 countries, nearly 2,000 employees participated. And we got some fairly interesting ideas out of that. And it takes some analysis after the event has closed to identify the common threads of discussion. Those have generated the most interest. You can look at the seniority or otherwise of the participants. You can sort of analyze participation on whatever level you choose. But just for example, some of the thoughts that developed for us were around innovative workforce or employment models. So, for example, would we see the concept of talent as a cloud? And the workforce that might be made up of traditional and full-time employees would tap into a global talent cloud that might be made up of individual freelancers, temporary agency workers, that sort of concept of talent, and then you draw down from that cloud depending on your actual business need at the time. Another great discussion thread was around performance and recognition in the next era of business. It started as people commenting on the concept of eBay, and you'll all be aware, I'm sure, that of rating sellers on eBay, and translating that into a performance review where people might be rated based on their common interactions.
Ben, you've got a minute left.
I beg your pardon. Okay, so I'm going to whistle through the next chart, social business. This is another example of sharing thinking on strategic HR topics. This is a bigger forum for HR that's a global forum. It's a kind of scaled-up version of what I have running in the UKI. Social recruiting, I don't think that's something that's too, I think that's almost becoming business as usual these days, to look at using LinkedIn, etc., as ways of driving your recruitment channel. And obviously saving spend in terms of agency, and we're now developing that to look at employee referrals using their social networks. It can be expanded into learning and doing virtual learning, and also in terms of recognition and using social tools to recognize employees on a global basis. And I have absolutely whistled through those last charts. I'm very sorry. So I would just say if anybody wants any more information on those, you can, of course, contact me directly. So I'll hand back to you, Rob. Sorry.
And that gives me the opportunity to say again that all of the speaker slides will be available next week on the PM website, and we will email all participants in this webinar, all of you, the audience, with the relevant link. Jen, it's been fascinating to hear all of these creative ideas, though I must say when I think of an HR jamming session, I still have this image of several hundred people on the dance floor on the final night of the CIPD annual conference. Those can be pretty creative occasions too. But back to business, let's hear the results of the final poll question. And a reminder, we asked, which one of these potential communities using social platforms offers most immediate added value for your business from HR? And what we have in the feedback, potential future recruits, 42%, but that's closely followed by learning and development communities at 39%, and your own internal HR community at 19%. So lots of different directions full of potential there. Thank you for responding as an audience to our poll questions. You still have an opportunity to send in individual questions for our panel of the three speakers. And I've been looking at the questions that have been flowing in, and Al, Lucile, and Jen, if you've got your breath back, I'd like to put the first question. And for the sake of you, the audience, we're going to keep our answers very brief here. But the first question is from James Shrimpton at RBC Wealth Management, and he quotes one of the speakers, I believe Al, as saying, throw the rule book out, but asks, how could this work in a financial or heavily regulated industry where we are required to satisfy the regulators? So I think James is talking about transparency and accurate records and doing things in the proper way. Al, would you like to start us off there, as this was a quote from you?
Certainly. I mean, it's a very good question, and I think this goes towards some of the fear and apprehension that people have in organizations about opening up too much, in a global organization as well, where you are highly regulated or you've got different geographic cultures. You've got to be careful what's said in one place, maybe what I think it's really all about, and we've seen examples from companies like Betfair and finance, the gambling industry, they're also highly regulated, but they've used social to grow their business inside and externally very, very quickly. I think it happens anyway. If you think you can control what people say, you're on a loser, really, because people will talk about you outside the company, will talk about you even though they're told not to according to the governance. So it's a question of getting the beliefs and values right in them, giving them a space to air their grievance internally, and having it responded to quickly and efficiently inside the organisation before it grows into some kind of fire.
Thanks, Al.
Yeah.
Can I ask Lucile if, from working with a variety of clients, of Sogeti's clients, you feel there are some organizations where this approach is more appropriate or less appropriate?
I would say for us, so we've had similar concerns because, as I said, we are working with banks, and you must know they are very regulated companies, and we have consultants. So our consultants are part of Sogeti, but they are working for banking clients, for example. And those consultants have restrictions and restraints when it comes to sharing internally. So here I'm really talking about sharing internally. So they do have things they can or cannot share, as expressly said by the clients. So indeed, it can be sometimes a challenge to identify what can or cannot be shared. But I think the issue is not so much about what can or cannot be said. It's more to get people engaged. It's more to have them being reactive. If they are facing difficulties, to know that they can share those difficulties, find solutions in common without necessarily violating the agreements that they had with the clients. And to this regard, the fear of sharing, I saw something very interesting that happened to me last week when I had a workshop with the legal department of the group. And those people, I was encouraging them to push people to have debates over ethics, compliance, and so on. And they were scared that if they push their people talking, people will in the conversation that they started themselves, the legal group, people will go out of the line, will cross the line. And my answer was, yes, indeed, but they are already, if they cross the line on an internal tool, they are probably already doing it when they have drinks with clients or with other peers. So the idea here is to train the people internally to avoid critical situation externally. It's an opportunity to have access to conversations that you might have ignored before.
Okay, and moving to Jane, how often do people cross the line within the IBM world, Jane?
Well, I guess our perspective on this is that we experience the same concerns conceptually, if I can put it that way. And we encourage people, we didn't feel that we had to rewrite the rule book on business conduct because we felt that to a large degree our existing guidelines on how we expected employees to behave in external interactions and concepts and what they would feel free to share and what they shouldn't share, that was a well-developed concept for us in any event. So we didn't feel the need to write the rule book on that. But I do think it's an evolution, if you like, and that. But I strongly believe that it shouldn't be a fear factor of that stops it starting in the first place. It's better to start it, remind people of their obligations in terms of confidentiality and business guidelines, etc., and then let them work within that to take it forward and actually start the initiative.
Thanks, Jane. I'm going to bowl individual questions to individual panelists now so that we can get through a few more questions. And the first one, perhaps to Lucile, is from Colin McAllister at the Met Office. And he is asking, isn't it the case that individuals in companies who can't see the importance of social collaboration tools spoil it for all of us by resisting change and innovation. In other words, it's not the company itself getting in the way, but middle management. Now, this obviously points to the cultural change issue that I know you've been very much involved with. How do you get over this problem in Sogeti?
I think we had a lot of questions and we had a lot of resistance when we failed to explain to our people what we were trying to achieve, why we chose this solution, and how concretely, with concrete business cases, it would make their job better. If you fail to prove this point from the very beginning, to prove the value of collaborating, first, that's the basis, and second, to use a social collaboration tool, then of course you will face resistance. But what I noticed is that as soon as I've been doing training sessions, I can have the most reluctant managers or consultants with me in the room at the beginning, and most of the time they are reluctant because they are extremely critical. So once you have responded to their questions and proved and guided them through how to use the tool to make their working life better and easier, you don't have this problem anymore. Of course, it's an evolution, it's a slow process because you need to train, convince all of them. But to me, it's an issue that is not necessarily a big one.
Thanks, Lucile. The next question is from Russell Kenny at LSBU, and I'd like to put this to Jane, because Russell is asking, can you recommend particular sources of evidence that could be used to convince senior managers to move towards more use of social media? This is if we can just widen it out a bit more, Jane. It's what are the tricks to gaining top management buy-in to this direction of travel?
Yes, I mean, I guess sometimes those in the top levels of management may be the ones for whom this is the least familiar, if I can be so bold as to say that. It's certainly something within IBM that we were conscious of. For us, it was a strategic direction for all employees, and particularly in terms of the leadership, to focus on their personal eminence. That's something of a buzzword, if you like, a strategic direction of importance for us as a company. And so that emphasis could be that's an engagement in the external world, but to emphasize one's own eminence on a particular subject matter. And because of that strong focus within the company, we were able to use, really demonstrate that use of social media allowed people to improve external awareness of their own abilities, their own capacity, their own expertise. And that played directly into, as I say, a strategic area for the company. So at a leadership level, it was that hook, if I can put it that way, which I think got over some of the barriers of people actually wanting to engage with what for them was a relatively unfamiliar platform.
Thanks, Jane. The next question is from Bhagavathi Ramchandran, and it is to observe that people from the baby boomer generation in many cases are apprehensive about using social media at work and need constant encouragement and support agents. How else can this challenge be handled? Al, can I ask you to tackle that one?
Yes, certainly. We found this in actually GSK when I was trying to drive social collaboration in that company, and we found trying to convince the middle management, the senior management, what the value was fraught by two problems. One was they insist on trying to find some sort of return on investment on their time, as well as any kind of money that they thought they had to put up. And this is a concept, it's a very difficult thing to kind of quantify that because of social you got this, although there is evidence out there. And the second one was learning something new or doing something which was fun. We try and instill the idea of fun in all of these things because, again, back to that cultural thing, if people believe in what they do and enjoy what they do, they'll do more of it. Some of the seniors felt that work was a place of work. And if they were to have a blog, what point is it to them when they know their kids have got blogs and they tell each other what they've had for breakfast on it? What value is that to them? But, you know, if you start to explain to them all the problems that they have in a company, knowing what's going on, how much work is redone because people don't share with each other what they're up to, solving the same problems that another part of an organisation has already solved. If you bring those things to the fore and engage those senior members in that discussion, in asking those questions and imparting their experience and knowledge over the years, it makes them more personable, it makes them enjoy what they do, and the whole thing kind of works. But you will have pockets which they're very reluctant and they're dragged into this sort of 21st century.
Just as around the family breakfast table too, no doubt.
Yes, yeah.
Jane, Janet Wilkes, who doesn't give an organisation, asks, what do you think is lost as social media collaboration, social business becomes more prevalent? What do we miss?
Well, I guess it's not a substitute for personal connection. It never can be, and I think that sense of personal connection is very relevant today. We are all human beings that we have ways of interacting which can be at their most effective when we are face-to-face, real time. But I think it's more a reality check that says, you know, you need to supplement those previous ways of working. You know, the sort of informal networking that used to go on as people met in the coffee queue or at the water cooler sort of thing. There just isn't the opportunity to replicate that sort of thing, which can stimulate connections, networks, ideas, and awareness of what other people are doing. In a global environment, certainly for us, we don't have an equivalent of that unless we really drive social collaboration through these sorts of media. So I would really hope that it's not representing a loss. It's just more of an absolute strategic need.
Okay, and Al. Amanda Towes at the Francis Crick Institute asks, do social collaboration tools replace the traditional intranet? Very quick answer on that, please.
No, they don't. That's probably synonymous to saying that newspapers are dead because of the internet. I think that there's a place for everything, and inside a company that's got a mix of ages, you definitely still do need all of the communication channels to work together. We find the younger generation do tend to like chat, instant conversations, Twitter, etc. But the middle and senior people, they tend to prefer email. They find the chat interrupts what they do. But it's just horses for courses, and I think you need them all, as long as they're consistently sending the same message.
Thanks. And Lucile, I have a question from Emma Mann at Blue Circle IT, who asks, with so much online activity in our lives, for example, Hotmail, LinkedIn, etc., do we have time to do any more social activities? Isn't this eating into work time, reading too many blogs? This is something you must have heard from many line manager, I imagine. How do you respond?
So I think just to be a bit more precise, for us, it's we are using social internally to support the work of our people. We are also using social media, but more in a marketing and HR perspective towards recruitment, for example. So I'm just going to focus on the internal use we make of social collaboration tool. As you might hear, it's about collaborating. So it's really part at the center of how people are supposed to work. We are a knowledge company, and it's expected of them to share. So the idea here, and what I respond when I get such questions from managers or even consultants, It's about substituting how you do certain things in your daily job and do it on the platform. For example, a very concrete example, kill the mailing list.
Lucile, I don't think we're going to have time to go into the example, but thank you for highlighting the essential point. We have reached the end of our time, and just to reiterate, the speaker slides will be available next week. We'll be in touch with every member of the audience by email to give you the link. The speakers welcome if you have anything particularly to ask them as individuals. I would like to thank our speakers, Al Shah, independent consultant, Jen Marsh of IBM, and Lucile Leclerq of Sogeti for a fascinating webinar. I would like to thank IBM for sponsoring the occasion. I hope you find this a useful way to spend your lunchtime. Thank you most of all to you, the audience, and we hope to see you again, hear you again at the next PM webinar. Good afternoon.